Auckland. We have a number of Met Office warnings in place for rain and the strongest winds initially in the southwest but moving across the south coast, potentially damaging gusts of wind. We are likely to see some disruption from the storm system moving in. Please check the details of those weather warnings on the Met Office website.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
It's 9:30 on Wednesday, the 1st of November. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner. We're back together.
Very nice to be back together. Now, station locked down. A pro-Palestine ceasefire rally took place in London Liverpool Street Station yesterday evening. More than 500 people joined to the sit-in protest. Let's have a listen to what passengers were greeted with.
There's going to be more of it, I fear. Hamas commander killed. Israel claims the bombing of a refugee camp in Gaza has taken out a key Hamas commander. Our security editor, Mark White, is in Tel Aviv.
And on some breaking developments, the Rafah crossing into Egypt is being opened up, we're told. Ambulances with some of the most badly injured will be heading back into Egypt for those people to get treated, and it's hoped that perhaps as many as 500 foreign nationals will be able to leave Gaza.
Thank you, Mark. That is breaking news. We'll bring you the latest on that. And Boris bombshell. It was revealed at the COVID inquiry that Boris Johnson once suggested that COVID was nature's way of dealing with old people. Apparently, his former top aide Dominic Cummings told the inquiry how he assessed Number 10's handling of the pandemic.
Widespread failure, but pockets of excellent people and pockets of excellent teams doing excellent work within an overall dysfunctional system.
Of course, he was in the excellent team, of course. The King expresses regret. Charles is in Kenya, where he's facing up to Britain's colonial past, saying there is no excuse for what he says unjustifiable acts of violence during the imperial rule. We're going to have the latest on his visit.
So much to talk about today. We're going to be having some very interesting discussions. Let us know your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.com. You are a big part of our conversation here. First, though, your very latest news with Rhiannon Jones.
Good morning, it's 9:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB Newsroom. Rishi Sunak welcomes senior politicians and technology bosses to Bletchley Park today for the world's first summit on the safety of artificial intelligence. US Vice President Kamala Harris, Elon Musk and companies including Google, Meta and Microsoft will look at the risks of AI. The Prime Minister's hoping to put the UK at the centre of global efforts to monitor the technology, as well as attracting business investment. The government's pledged £38 million towards AI projects around the world, which aim to boost safe and responsible programming. It's part of a collaboration between Britain, Canada and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Gaza's Rafah border crossing will open to allow foreign nationals and some injured civilians into Egypt. An agreement between Israel, Hamas and Egypt, brokered by the US and Qatar, will mean around 80 severely wounded Gazans can get treatment. Ambulances are waiting at the border. These are live images from the Rafah border, where the evacuations will take place. Up to 500 foreign passport holders are also expected to cross into Egypt. James Cleverly says UK teams are ready to assist British nationals as soon as they can leave. It's not yet clear how long the crossing will remain open. A former top civil servant due to appear at the COVID inquiry later. Helen McNamara was Deputy Cabinet Secretary in 2020 and 2021 and played a key role in Britain's COVID response. She also made headlines for providing a karaoke machine for a party held at Downing Street during lockdown, which resulted in a fine from the Metropolitan Police. 2 days of hearings have described a dysfunctional and indecisive culture as Boris Johnson's government struggled with its response to the pandemic. And amber weather warnings are in place for the south coast of England as Storm Ciarán approaches the UK. The Met Office says wind and rain could bring potential risk to life and property. Parts of Northern Ireland have already been flooded by heavy rainfall and people are being warned not to travel. It comes less than 2 weeks after Storm Babette caused widespread damage across the UK. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now, it's back over to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning. We're back together again.
We are. It's been some weeks. We've missed each other terribly, obviously.
We're delighted to be here. Let us know your thoughts this morning, gbviews@gbnews.com. How much have you missed us?
There we are. Now, talking serious stuff now, a group of pro-Palestinian activists staged a sit-in at Liverpool Street Station in London last night in protest at Israel's war with Hamas.
That's right. So that's Liverpool Street Station here in London. And more than 500 people joined the protest. Well, the thing is, they're saying they're demanding an instant ceasefire to the attacks. But actually, what they are chanting, Sarah Vine, who's with us now, is Free Palestine, which is a very different sort of protest.
Well, the thing is, what really surprises me about so many of these protests, which seem to be supporting Hamas, I mean, I'm not, not everybody there will be, of that ilk, but there are a lot of people at these protests who are openly supporting Hamas, wearing pictures of people with, parachutes and chanting understood Hamas slogans. Is that so many of them are women? It's very... In fact, this group was organised...
People listening on the radio, that I would say that protest is dominated by women.
And it was organised by something called the Sisters of something or other. And it really upsets me, the fact that so many women seem to be supporting a group of people who just went into civilian houses and just raped and tortured other women. I mean, and also let's not forget
and killed their babies.
Yes, and also let's not forget that Hamas are funded by Iran. And we've just had last week another young girl died in a hospital in Iran, having been beaten up by the morality police, who were also, as it happens, women. I think as a woman, it's very disturbing, this sort of anti-woman feeling from women. It's just really bizarre. I just don't understand it.
I guess they would argue that so many of the lives currently being lost in Gaza because of the bombing are children. Like, Gaza has a disproportionate number of under-18s who live there. But I agree with you, Sarah, because what I'm not hearing necessarily is calls for a ceasefire. This is very much a political rally dealing with an issue that, for the vast majority of people in this country, feels a very long way away. And
I don't think it is a long way away. I mean, I think when you strip everything back, if this is about the right of Israel to exist, and it's about the right of Israel's citizens to not have incursions into their land the whole time. If you don't think that Israel has a right to exist, that's a separate thing. But I do, and I think a lot of people do, and that's the position of the British government. It is a legitimate state, and it has the right to exist. And therefore, if it is attacked by terrorists, which is what happened on October the 7th, it has a right to retaliate and to defend itself. Now, of course, the humanitarian situation in Gaza is appalling, but the problem with Hamas is that they are embedded in Gaza among the civilian population. And that tells you the kind of, I can't think of a polite word to say, the kind of people they are, which is that they don't care about civilians. Well, they use them as, these
human shields.
They use them as human shields.
They do.
These people who run Hamas hide behind the skirts of women, and they hide behind under the cots of little babies, and then so inevitably. And they do it on purpose because then it makes Israel look like big bad baby killers.
But how do we marry this idea that we've got to have the right to free demonstrations and protest with the idea that
it has to be conducted within the rule of the law, and you can't incite hatred. It's the other day the police were taking down stickers of
missing Israeli children in London and Manchester,
and they were taking down perfectly innocent posters saying this child is missing because they were worried about, creating... I mean, you can't pander to sort of terrorist sympathisers. It's just...
say about the police that they're doing that, though, Sarah. The police are doing that.
I just,
they think that's what their bosses want. They think that's what their bosses want. That's the worry.
It means that they're frightened, doesn't it?
Exactly. And, we see in Paris people are having Stars of David put on their doors. And Jewish citizens in Britain are really, really frightened.
I think the most terrifying footage that I've seen this week was at the airport in Russia when the flight arrived from Tel Aviv, and hundreds, potentially thousands of people had stormed the airport and were surrounding the aeroplane. If anybody had got off that plane, they would have been lynched. Somehow, authorities have to step up to quell this division. It's heartbreaking.
And if you look on... I mean, a lot of this is coming from social media. TikTok, particularly, is very, very pro-Hamas. If you go on there, you will see that there's a... And there are a lot of very young people who just get their news from a 30-second TikTok clip, and it simplifies the situation beyond belief. But it's a really grown-up problem, and it's not something that you can just sort of dismiss in a piece of little sort of dancey TikTok thing.
Horrible moral quandary.
Sarah, you're staying with us with the breaking news is from the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, who says the Rafah crossing is likely to open today for a first group of foreign nationals, which could include Brits, to leave Gaza.
That's right. He said UK teams are ready to assist British nationals as soon as they are able to leave. It's vital that life-saving humanitarian aid can enter Gaza as quickly as possible. So Mark White joins us live now from Tel Aviv. Mark, you broke this news for us just at the top of our show. What more do we know?
Well, it looks as though the preparations are underway for just what James Cleverly was suggesting would happen, that finally, all these weeks after the 7th of October attacks, when that crossing has remained closed, except for a few aid trucks in, that it will open to allow some of these foreign nationals and dual national citizens to leave Gaza. As we speak, hundreds of people are now gathering at the border ahead and anticipating the opening of the crossing. We've had a stream of ambulances that have come in from the Egyptian side into Gaza to pick up, we're told, more than 80 of the most severely injured people from Gaza, civilians that will be taken out through the Rafah crossing and into Egypt. And nearby, Egypt has set up a field hospital with the latest in technology and doctors available to start treating these people in earnest as they come out. In addition to that, we are told that perhaps as many as 500 foreign nationals could be allowed to leave through the Rafah crossing today, and among them, it's hoped, will be British nationals as well. So they're queuing. There are border force officials from the UK, border officials from other nations as well there to help process these people, to ensure they are who they say they are, that they're British nationals, that they're not Hamas terrorists, for instance, trying to come out through Egypt. So they will be checked. Israel has seemingly got the assurances it needed. The Egyptians wanted assurances as well. There have been very significant negotiations taking place with the Foreign Office and other governments with Israel and Egypt over recent days to achieve what we seem to be witnessing now on the Rafah border, the opening of this border, at least in part, to allow these foreign nationals and these injured people to get through.
All right, Mark, thank you. That's Mark White. Sarah Vine still with us. Well, that's some good news.
Yeah, I mean, humanitarian corridors are the way forward, obviously, because you've got to get people out from under Hamas. Yeah. Because the thing is, if you imagine that the terrorist group had embedded itself in Chiswick and was, hiding in people's houses, what's the government supposed to do? Just let them stay there? They can't. They've got to get rid of them. So you've got to have a humanitarian corridor. Yeah. People have got to come out of Gaza. They've got to be helped. They've got to be able to leave.
And I keep reading there's no electricity in the hospitals in Gaza, but there is electricity to power the Hamas missiles.
Well, this is the problem, is that the whole... Israel basically, runs all the electricity and all the water and all the internet in Gaza, and the problem is that if they switch it off, they do it because they don't want Hamas to have access to it, but then, of course, it affects... Again, this is the problem with having a terrorist organisation that is embedded in a large civilian population.
And then, of course, the question being, how many people are Egypt going to take from Gaza? How many will they home? How many...
Well, the thing is that they don't want them because they're worried that they might also be terrorists. And this is the issue.
How can they vet them?
That there's a reason why the surrounding countries are very reluctant to take them, because they don't want this in their back garden. It's very complicated and very difficult.
It is. And, of course, we're hoping there are some British nationals who are going to get out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just think all innocent people should be able to get out.
Yeah, they should.
Do you think Keir Starmer's managing to extricate himself yet, Sarah, from the mess that he's getting himself?
Well, I mean, he's very much being asked by the grassroots to nail his colours to the mast. I mean, let's face it, the anti-Semitism problem in the Labour Party is real, was real, still is real, and it hasn't gone away.
78% of British Muslims vote Labour.
Yeah, they papered it over quite well, but it's there, and of course this scratched the surface.
Yeah, and I can still remember the Labour conference when ghastly. What's his name? Corbyn was leader, and the Palestinian flags decorating the conference hall. They've all gone, and everyone's saying in Starmer's, I see that's all changed. It hasn't, because the activists and many of the MPs, their hearts lie with people in Gaza
and the councillors
and they don't like
Labour.
Israel.
No.
Can we just say, whenever you mention Jeremy Corbyn, you always say ghastly before it.
Because
the ghastly Jeremy Corbyn.
Because, let me just, in case you didn't catch that, the ghastly Jeremy Corbyn. We could even add Marxist.
Right, now, the picture being painted of Boris Johnson's handling of the COVID pandemic is one of absolute chaos.
One of the main headlines, Boris Johnson was slow to make decisions and had the view that COVID was, quote, nature's way of dealing with old people.
So as it continues today, will it be as explosive as what we heard from Dominic Cummings? GB News reporter Pip Thompson is with us now. Just sum up, Pip, if you will, for viewers who didn't see it yesterday, the COVID inquiry. What came out from Cummings's analysis of the situation?
Apart from swearing.
The awful language. They had
terrible language.
Hugo Keith KC, and this is there's nothing actually more entertaining than a lawyer reading out 4-letter words from a WhatsApp message that was 3 years ago. It became
ever so difficult to follow, though, didn't it?
Because there were so many bleeps.
Had to keep cutting away from
because of all the bleeps.
But it's satire. But it is also infuriating for those of us who want proper answers.
I think what it did, though, when all these WhatsApp messages were read out, showed us the indecision, the dithering, the slagging off that was going on, whereas at home, you know, we were trying to follow the rules, do what we were told, and it was utter chaos. That is what we heard from Dominic Cummings yesterday. And one of the people mentioned was the woman, the former Deputy Cabinet Secretary, Helen McNamara, who will be starting to give evidence to the inquiry in the next few minutes. Now, she starts giving her evidence today. There was a bit of an introduction about her yesterday from Dominic Cummings, when he was accused of being misogynistic towards her. We've actually got a clip we can play you. Just have
an extract from Mr. Johnson's Fight Back WhatsApp group. You say this at 12:20. If I have to come back to Helen's PET, what's that? Propriety and ethics.
Yes.
Part of the Cabinet Office, or number 10. Designed to waste huge amounts of my time so I can't spend it on other stuff. I'll personally handcuff her and escort her from the building. Had you got form, Mr. Cummings, for arranging for people to be escorted from number 10 before?
You shouldn't believe everything you read in the newspapers. That story is not accurate.
I don't care how it's done, but that woman must be out of our hair. We cannot keep dealing with this horrific meltdown of the British state while dodging stilettos from that.
Well, Sarah, because Sarah, you know Dominic Cummings. You've written a powerful piece in the paper today about his unhinged vendetta against Boris and your own ex-husband, by the way, Michael Gove, who he used to be friends with.
Yes.
Is he a misogynist?
No, he's an equal opportunities
pig.
Yes, he's rude to everybody. Yes. He's not particularly. I mean, women are not especially singled out for unpleasant treatment. I think he coined a fantastic new swear word for members of the cabinet that ends in pig.
Yeah, starts with the F word. But this is what is so infuriating, Sarah. I don't care whether Dominic Cummings is a misogynist. This isn't an inquiry designed to tell us the characters of these jokers. Because if we have another pandemic at the behest of China or the WHO, these people won't be in power. It doesn't actually matter what their character is like.
You're completely right. I mean, but this specific bit of this inquiry is the political bit. There is going to be more, and it will be. I mean, for example, I can't wait to find out why it was that, for some reason, the government decided to buy every single private hospital and then never used a single bed. I mean, there are all sorts of much more important questions that this inquiry needs to ask, and a lot of them are about, just incompetence in government and governments. This is the sort of psychodrama, political psychodrama bit. Once this is over, we will get to the sort of, I think, the more important stuff.
But this is costing the taxpayer. The psychobabble political drama is costing the taxpayer how many million? 40 million starting bid?
But Cummings' view also was there was a tiny pocket of people who were very good, which of course includes himself, and all the politicians were morons.
I would say this now, which is that I have had several messages from people today saying, he bullied me to within an inch of my sanity. The thing about Dominic is that he's very clever, very brilliant in many, many ways, but he has a very abrasive style. And that's fine as long as it's contained. The problem with problem with COVID and the way things went, and Boris being at one point really ill and sort of not really. is that he got out of control and there was no one to stop him.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened there. And I think he began to think, as did Lee, and to an extent Simon Case, that they were actually running the show. That it was their thing.
And they're unelected.
They were completely unelected. And the extraordinary irony of them complaining endlessly about Carrie sticking her oar in is that they have no more right than she
Yes,
ever
absolutely.
did.
They're unelected.
I thought, Pip, for me, the most interesting part of the inquiry yesterday was when they talked about the borders, because this was yesterday the discussion at the start of the pandemic, January, February. Should they have closed borders more quickly into March? And then, and actually, the way that Hugo KC was pushing towards the fact that we need a track and trace and isolate system.
I think Cummings said if that had been implemented by March 2020, this lockdown need not have happened. Cummings also claimed that he was saying that at the end of December, flights to and from China should have been stopped.
Yeah, but nobody could quite understand why they were still coming in.
And that's the bit that should frighten us.
And I remember very clearly from the time was that what you remember. We look on it, hindsight is a very wonderful thing.
It is.
But at the time, that seemed like a really draconian measure. Like no one had ever done anything like that ever. We'd never blocked flights from we'd never locked down the airports or the ports or anything like that. So the whole thing was it was about a cognitive shift taking place in what would be doable and acceptable. And I think because the thing about Dominic, which makes him really brilliant, is that he is really good at reading the charts. He does understand the data, and in his brain he will have looked at that and seen that would have been the right thing to do.
But the data was only a few days before lockdown. Only a few days before lockdown, they were still trying to push for herd immunity.
Yeah.
Talking about
I think there was a big debate about whether they did the Sweden model,
which has been proven to have been extremely successful,
or whether they did what they ended up doing. And there were a lot of people in government who felt that the right thing to do would be to isolate the vulnerable, to make sure that they were properly looked after and protected, and to put in place measures to make sure that they were not isolated socially and whatever, but just that they were kept out of harm's way, and to let the
younger, healthy
hot population have the disease.
Which gets us into what has been interpreted as Boris Johnson's comments about the elderly, those diary entries.
Well, you see, because he was trying to make a really complex, difficult decision about long-term repercussions of COVID and long-term repercussions of locking down. We have seen those long-term repercussions. It's described as a $400 billion decision. More people have now died because they haven't been treated for cancer and other diseases than have died because of COVID.
And younger people.
He was trying to game all that and to work out what was the thing about people. The thing that people don't understand is that it wasn't about the right thing. It was about the least bad thing. There were no good options. There was no silver bullet. There was nothing that was...
So is the least bad thing for older people to accept
just for everybody,
no,
for the
because
country, for the whole country.
Yes, but also I want to defend Boris Johnson on that, and far be it from me to do that on a regular basis. I might have to start doing it more regularly in this building. But he is saying, like a bad flu season, and we hadn't had bad flu season 2018, 2019. So he's saying, like in a bad flu season, unfortunately, some very frail and elderly people will succumb, or a bad norovirus season, but flu is a better comparison.
But can you understand how badly that goes down when that's heard at the inquiry?
I understand that's Dominic Cummings' interpretation.
Well, no,
of
that's
what
Patrick Vallence's entry in his diary.
But some of this, remember, Pip, this is comments made between a politician and a scientist in a corridor. They're almost like flippant remarks, which then get written down. It wasn't. He didn't say this in some high-powered cabinet committee meeting. He just said it off the top of his head. And what a lot of people were thinking.
But also, this is somebody turning over the options and the reality in their mind, trying to work out what is the right solution. So you'll say, well, if we do that, then this is what happens. If we do that, this is what happens. So Dominic's criticism of him as being a ditherer is not right. It's just that the decisions that he was being asked to make were so difficult and so complicated and had such huge repercussions. Of course he was going to ask lots of people's opinion. Of course he was going to game the various options, and there was a lot of that going on.
But the suggestion was the last person's opinion that he heard was the one that he...
Well, that's Dominic.
But I also think there's something noble about a Conservative Prime Minister thinking, I do not want to close down this economy.
So why did he?
Because in the end, they looked around the world, and everybody else is doing it. They've followed suit.
The
But also
absolute
in the
definition
end,
of being
no,
spineless.
in the end, I have to say, I saw a lot of the projections that were coming in, and they were apocalyptic.
And they
In
were
the end-
wildly inaccurate.
Well,
when Neil Ferguson
that's
said
it,
500,000 people will be dead,
Yeah.
it was modelling.
Exactly.
But they were scientists.
the modelling was
They were
telling
the
them
scientists.
that if they didn't do this...
We need to go.
lots of
Can I
people
just
would
say
die.
quickly, just to stress, Boris Johnson will be giving evidence,
Yes, he
as
will.
will Rishi Sunak before the end of the year. So what we heard
Well, let's
yesterday
hope
was
It'll be
one off.
They asked the
standing room
right
only.
questions. Right, don't go anywhere. We're going to be talking about King Charles in Kenya. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 1st of November. How did that happen? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Boris bombshell. Well, it was revealed at the COVID inquiry Boris Johnson once suggested that COVID was nature's way of dealing with old people. His former top aide, Dominic Cummings, told the inquiry how he assessed Number 10's handling of the pandemic.
Widespread failure, but pockets of excellent people and pockets of excellent teams doing excellent work within an overall dysfunctional system.
it slightly differently. Slowly stopping the boats. Small boat arrivals of migrants are down by a third compared to last year. The Home Office are calling it good progress. Is Rishi Sunak finally getting a grip of the problem? Let us know what you think.
And the King expresses regret. Charles is in Kenya with the Queen, where he's facing up to Britain's colonial past. He says no excuse for unjustifiable acts of violence during imperial rule. We'll give you the latest on his visit.
And XL bully dogs banned. The breed is being added to the list of banned dogs in England and Wales, making it illegal to own one without an exemption from February next year. That bully dog story, it is amazing what the governments can do quickly when they want to.
And they have done it well, and because they'll be banned by February, and they only, Rishi said it a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
But you've got to get cross-party consents as well, but they've still got to get it through the House of Lords, and there may be some silly old peer who tries to throw a spanner in the works, but there'd be an outcry if they did.
Well, if you are a silly old peer and you want to email us your reasons why, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Because let me tell you, there are quite a lot of silly old peers.
Let us know your thoughts on all of our stories this morning. First, though, here's your very latest news with Rhiannon.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's coming up to 2 minutes past 10. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. Rishi Sunak welcomes senior politicians and technology bosses to Bletchley Park today for the world's first summit on the safety of artificial intelligence. US Vice President Kamala Harris, Elon Musk and companies including Google, Meta and Microsoft are assessing the risks of AI. The Prime Minister's hopes to put the UK at the centre of global efforts to monitor the technology, as well as attracting business investment. The government's pledged £38 million towards boosting safe and responsible AI programming around the world. It's part of a collaboration between the UK, Canada and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Gaza's Rafah border crossing has opened to allow foreign nationals, as well as some injured civilians, into Egypt. These pictures are coming to us live from Rafah. Now, we'll throw you to those in a second when we get them. An international agreement will mean around 80 severely wounded Gazans can get treatment. The first group have now crossed the border in ambulances and are receiving treatment at a nearby field hospital. Up to 500 foreign passport holders are also expected to cross into Egypt. James Cleverly says UK teams are ready to assist British nationals as soon as they can leave. Aid trucks have also crossed, with the Foreign Secretary warning its vital life-saving aid enters into Gaza to ease the humanitarian crisis there. It's not yet clear how long the crossing will remain open, and we'll bring you those images, those live images, as soon as we get them. It comes as the Israeli military says 9 of its soldiers have been killed during its ground offensive into Gaza. Explosions have been heard this morning as Israel's bombardment continues. The Israel Defense Forces says it's hit 11,000 Hamas targets so far. The IDF also claims an airstrike yesterday killed a senior Hamas commander it says was a ringleader of the attack on the 7th of October. Palestinian officials say 50 Gazans were killed and another 150 injured in that strike. Campaigners back here in London have projected the words "ceasefire now" onto the Houses of Parliament in the colours of the Palestinian flag. It was organised by Save the Children and other charities that say Rishi Sunak must put lives above politics and back calls for a ceasefire. They're handing a petition with over 300,000 signatures over to the government. In other news, a former top civil servant's due to appear at the COVID inquiry later. Helen McNamara was Deputy Cabinet Secretary in 2020 and 2021 and played a key role in Britain's COVID response. She also made headlines for providing a karaoke machine for a party held at Downing Street during lockdown, resulting in a fine from the Metropolitan Police. 2 days of hearings have described a dysfunctional and indecisive culture as Boris Johnson's government struggled with its response to the pandemic. House prices increased by 0.9% in October, which experts say reflects the limited supply of properties on the market. Nationwide's market index showed an increase on last month's figures, though average prices across the UK are down 3.3% compared to last year. The Building Society says market activity remains weak, with the number of mortgages approved in September down 30%. Doctors are urging people to get their COVID and flu jabs after it was revealed millions of those who are eligible haven't yet taken up the offer. Cases of flu and COVID are expected to rise significantly during the colder months. A new campaign called Get Winter Strong aims to encourage people to get the jab even if they don't typically come forward. Doctors say it's one of the most important things any of us can do to protect ourselves from serious illness. Hundreds of schools in Scotland are closed today as support staff walk out in a dispute over pay. Janitors, cleaners and pupil support assistants are among those striking. It's part of rolling action by Unison members after they rejected an earlier pay offer. More walkouts are expected next week. Amber weather warnings are in place for the south coast of England as Storm Ciarán approaches the UK. The Met Office says wind and rain could bring potential risk to life and property. Parts of Northern Ireland have already been flooded due to heavy rainfall and people have been warned not to travel. It comes less than 2 weeks after Storm Babette caused widespread damage across the UK. And the King and Queen are in Kenya on day 2 of their state visit. Their Majesties are celebrating animal welfare and environmental conservation with a tour of an elephant orphanage on the Queen's agenda. The King will also visit an urban forest to highlight the importance of green spaces in our cities. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car and digital radio, and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back over to Andrew and Beth.
Good morning, it's 10:07. What day is it?
Why did they make those royals do that?
What, dancing?
If you were listening, forgive me, but Camilla was being forced to dance with some locals. She looked horrendously uncomfortable, as did they.
We're going to be talking about that trip in a little while, but you've been getting in touch at home. Thank you so much. A lot of people saying lovely to see you back, saying you look very well and rested, not they like your hair. And
someone compared me yesterday to that guy from
Peaky Blinders.
Peaky Blinders.
You look 10 years younger. Right, and also about the protests in Liverpool Street Station yesterday. Jules has said, I'm appalled by the terrifying scenes of protests at Liverpool Street. Very intimidating. I can't help thinking we'll need a strong military presence on Remembrance Day.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, and David says, one of the most depressing things I've ever seen in my life are those police officers tearing down posters of missing Israeli children. My faith in Britain has gone.
What do you think possessed them?
They don't want any trouble. I presume it was in a predominantly Muslim area, maybe, that somebody had put they were on the shutters on the front of shop windows. I guess they're trying to keep the tensions down. I'm not defending it, but I can understand the police are under a lot of pressure at the moment.
The Chief Constable has apologised, but dear me.
I know. And also about the COVID inquiry, Jessica has said the COVID inquiry should be about learning and understanding how to better deal with future pandemics, etc. This inquiry, however, is allowing a political agenda to take place that once again blames Boris Johnson for absolutely everything.
Well, he was Prime Minister. That's what happens when the buck stops at the top.
Do you think they're going to let us talk to him? On GB News when he comes
Well,
in?
he's going to be a star member on the team sheet, and I think he should do his first interview.
With me?
No, with us.
Yeah.
That's what you mean. Us.
That is what I mean. But I might have a different sort of question to you,
Well,
Andrew.
we can agree.
Yeah, I might have a
What
different
you're
type
gonna
of
ask,
question
yeah.
than you would, but anyway. Not that I've been turning over the idea of being in a room with him for the last 3 years. Anyway, Nicola says, as a vulnerable autoimmune person, I was extremely worried that if the elderly, vulnerable and disabled were locked down and the rest of the country free to live, we might have been forgotten and the chase for a vaccine would not have been expedited. It's a really interesting thought, Nicola. And Peter says, the people knew that COVID was a fraud pandemic. The people know the immigration invasion is the only pandemic that now needs 100% of the government to listen to and stop to remove. It wasn't a fraud pandemic, but it was certainly exaggerated.
OK, well, now, let's talk about the picture being painted, of course, of the government handling of the pandemic was one of chaos, according to one Dominic Cummings.
That's right. He served, of course, as Mr Johnson's chief aide at the start of the pandemic, gave evidence for several hours yesterday. Let's have a look.
Number 10 is not configured to be the nerve centre of a national crisis like COVID.
Because of the absence of personnel or the absence of structure that allows people in Number 10 to liaise with all the other parts of government?
In every way, physically, in terms of in terms of the physical layout, and the lack of the proper rooms that you would have for a crisis centre, in terms of the personnel, in terms of the power, as I've tried to explain. Real power on these things is almost entirely in the Cabinet Office, not in Number 10. So Number 10 was just completely unsuitable for this.
Well, joining us now is the political columnist at The Sun, Trevor Kavanagh, who's had a long and experienced eye on all matters politics. Trevor, morning to you. One thing you can, people who don't know Dominic Cummings like you and I do have worked out by now that he's a bully, he's arrogant, rude and very self-centred. But does some of his criticisms of Boris, are they legitimate in the sense that he delayed and changed his mind, it seemed, from one day to the next?
Well, I agree that there are some charges that stick with Boris, and I have to say that I've known Dominic Cummings as someone, known him quite closely for about a quarter of a century, and I am personally surprised, and maybe you are too, at the way he's transformed from a very thoughtful operator to basically a megalomaniac, a destructive megalomaniac, whose puppet was Lee Kane, the press officer, who's now turned completely a turtle on this and is blaming Boris for everything. And Boris does deserve some blame for lots of things. But he was absolutely dead right in those early days when he was talking about trying to live with COVID for those initial months. And I think that he's learned, and so has the rest of the world, that Sweden got it right. We were going to follow Sweden. We weren't going to have a lockdown. And Boris was right to resist.
Do you think, I mean, some people are saying, should we care about the bad language he uses? What we should really be caring about is, were the right decisions made? It seems to me, from even what Cummings was saying, that Boris was straining
you came across some obstacles
not to lock down.
In obtaining material that you needed for your witness statement. Could you tell us something about that?
I did, and I want to be quite careful because I think...
Just sorry to interrupt you, Trevor. Basically, that was Helen McNamara there, who's giving her evidence at the moment. So apologies, there was a little bit of a technical crossover there. We will be reporting what Helen was saying.
So I don't know if you heard the question. What we're saying, it seemed to me from Cummings that Boris was straining at the leash initially to avoid a lockdown because of the huge damage on the economy, school children and all the rest of it.
Yes, and hasn't he been absolutely vindicated in that stance, which was shared by everybody else for a while alongside him, including the health experts, Whitty and Valance, and indeed, I think, by Dominic himself at one point. And what we have had as a result of these decisions, which went completely wrong, is a cost for the country in economic and social terms, which will never be repaired in our lifetimes.
I just want to read to you, if I can, the WhatsApp message of Boris Johnson, which was revealed yesterday, which is where Boris Johnson said, "I must say I've been slightly rocked by some of the data on COVID fatalities. The median age is 82, 81 for men and 85 for women. That is above life expectancy. So get COVID and live longer. Hardly anyone under 60 goes into hospital, and of those, virtually all survive." He said, "I'm no longer buying all this NHS overwhelmed stuff. Folks, I think we need to calibrate." Now, the question, Trevor, that needs answering surely is, why didn't he recalibrate? Who influenced him to suddenly continue down the route that we now know has caused so much harm? I'm frustrated they're not asking the right questions, Trevor.
Well, I'm frustrated too. I think this inquiry is turning into a travesty. It's missing the point. And Boris was absolutely right, once again, on this particular point. As a spokesman for the aged over 80s, I can speak with some authority that we are now seeing people living well into a period of more than average age who are suffering from various associated diseases with their age group, who are actually regarded by actuarial experts as a pensioner harvest whenever a thing like a COVID or a flu attack hits. They make allowances for this mathematical preparation, exactly this sort of It's not the heartless sort of attitude that is being portrayed here. It is a fact of life and death.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, we get quite uncomfortable talking about those things, Trevor.
And also, Trevor, I think the other thing, just finally with you, is that some of the things the Prime Minister said, it may appear now cold-hearted and flippant, but actually he was just talking to colleagues in a corridor in a meeting, and these sort of conversations would be happening in cabinet rooms all around the world.
Exactly, and in every other administration through history.
Yeah.
So yes, we're seeing Boris being scapegoated for things which, if we look at this in the way that the COVID inquiry should be looking at, really go back to the SAGE organisation, which was grotesquely irresponsible and inaccurate, and led us down all sorts of garden paths which were more responsible for deaths than anything that Boris or the government did. I think that the inquiry is missing a very important point here, that the advice upon which the government relied was wrong, that it was misguided, and in some cases, I think it was politically misdirected.
OK, thank you so much. Brilliant, as always, political columnist at The Sun, Trevor Kavanagh. And we're joined now in the studio by co-founder of Us For Them, Molly Kingsley. Morning, Molly. If it wasn't for you, there would be no frame of reference for children on this COVID inquiry. Just explain to people, first of all, what that means.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of the many problems that is becoming apparent with this inquiry. So when the original terms of reference for the inquiry were announced almost a year and a half, 2 years ago now, they had mentioned education, but very narrowly. They did not include the word children. So you have this idea that you have this cohort of, 10 million little people that were going to be entirely excluded from the inquiry, other than through the impact on schooling, which, is a big part of children's lives, but it's not the only thing that went wrong with children in the pandemic.
How could that have even been considered as an option?
Not enough parents in the decision-making process.
But was that down to Baroness Hallett, who's chairing the inquiry, or I can't work out who was thinking that was legitimate?
I think it's indicative of a really core failing throughout government governance processes. No one is thinking about vulnerable people and children. And in fact, there was a really, really interesting statement from Cummings yesterday on just that point that hasn't been picked up. And actually, it's so interesting, I wrote it down. And what he said was that he was asked directly by the KC, who was thinking about the impact of lockdown, not of COVID, but the impact of lockdown on the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
And Cummings answered, and this is a quote.
And just to be clear, so what he meant by that was the lockdown impacts on abused wives, children in care, people locked at home who needed extra help.
Exactly. So on this cohort, he didn't actually mention children, the case, but he meant the people who were going to be most impacted through lockdown. And what Cummings said, and I thought this just speaks to so many of the issues, he said almost that whole aspect was almost entirely appallingly neglected by the entire planning system.
So nobody in that whole operation, Number 10 has 140-odd people rattling around in there, thought about?
No, there wasn't a plan. He said that. There wasn't even a plan to make a plan. And to answer your question about, what happened with the kids, well, there wasn't a plan. No one was thinking about the kids. And, actually, we know it goes much beyond that. No one was thinking about the harms of lockdown.
Mental health and the failure of education.
The economic cost. I mean, it's just...
And we've got Helen McNamara that we're seeing here. So she is the British former civil servant. She served as Deputy Cabinet Secretary in the Cabinet Office when all of this was going on.
She's the most senior woman in Number 10.
What do you want her to say, Molly? Or but maybe let me turn that differently. What do you want her to be asked? Because the frustration for me is the questions are awful.
Yeah, the questions are not really cutting through. And it was very interesting, actually, when Cummings said that yesterday, which was a very big revelation, even if we all suspected it, to hear it. And he wasn't questioned about it. The KC moved on, and the next question was about the impact of long COVID. And you just think, there's this disconnect.
Hang on, yeah.
But to answer your question, I mean, I think she has to be asked about the governance processes, the decision-making. Were costs balanced against benefits? And if not, why not?
And I know that I've read some of the stuff that she said, that the women in Number 10 were just shouted down by the men, presumably Dominic Cummings being one of them, who says he's not a misogynist, despite we know what he called her in a tweet which I would never call a woman.
No. I mean, he said he called the men worse, didn't he? But I mean, it still
Really?
reads...
Oh, so that's okay,
that was his defence.
But interesting that women who've got a big argument in this, because women are always in charge of childcare, or normally, aren't they? They were drowned out by the men.
And I think that's, you know, that from the very beginning, it was a very myopic response that, in particular, was terrible for children and families. I mean, it just was.
Just one last point. The most chilling bit for me yesterday was where they both agreed, Cummings and Hugo Keith, that what the country needed was a test and trace and isolate system, because then we would have all been OK. What does he mean by that, Molly?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the most worrying thing about the inquiry. They have a preferred storyline, and their preferred storyline is we should have more interventions, we should have locked down sooner, harder, we should have a big test and trace diagnostic system. Now, you know, that may or may not be a valid line, but we should be questioning it, we should be challenging it. And we know trust and trace was a £37 billion waste of money.
Completely.
Why would we have more of it? It's insane.
But you know why? Because out of every crisis, of every government throughout history, comes more control of individual people.
And also, it's follow my leader. If they did it somewhere else, we'd better do the same. Otherwise, you'll be criticised.
I think that you've hit the nail on the head. There is a chronic and, I think, quite criminal lack of leadership here. Where are the leaders? Where is the accountability? There is none.
If it had come to us first, maybe we might have done things differently.
And if Boris had stuck to his instincts, and I know he's been badly painted, I think that's very unfair.
I think it's very unfair.
And they saw all the problems with the health service in Italy at crisis point. People were dying in corridors, and that's what panicked them.
And we know that a lot of that information coming through the media, you know, we know it was exaggerated. We know in some cases the images were fake. I mean, it's incredible that we based a pandemic response on this.
On Chinese propaganda, which previously we would have ignored. Molly, lovely to see you. Thank you so much. We will be letting you know how that testimony from Helen McNamara goes at the COVID inquiry this morning.
Yeah, we will. Still to come, the Charles and the Queen. They're in Kenya. We're going to have the latest.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Very good morning.
Yeah, it's 10:25 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce. But I normally get that time checked wrong, don't I?
Yeah, well done. Right, King Charles is in Kenya for his first state visit to a Commonwealth country as monarch.
And in a major speech last night, he acknowledged the painful aspects of Britain and Kenya's shared history. Here's what he had to say.
We must also acknowledge the most painful times of our long and complex relationship. The wrongdoings of the past are a cause of the greatest sorrow and the deepest regret. There were abhorrent and unjustifiable acts of violence committed against Kenyans, and for that, there can be no excuse.
Oh, it's a shame, all this, you know, isn't it? Cameron Walker's with us in the studio, Royal Correspondent. It's a shame, Cameron, that he's having to spend all this time, every time he goes anywhere now. He didn't overtly apologise, but he has to be all sorry about what Britain's done in the past.
It's his own fault, because he said they've got to engage with it, and they shouldn't.
Well, the problem is that the British government would have had some say in that speech, and they would have thought it necessary to have some kind of nod to the atrocities which happened 60-odd years ago.
£20 million compensation 10 years ago.
And notice that he said sorrow, not sorry, which is 2 very, very different things. From my understanding, the British government's stance is that a modern-day administration is not liable for what a colonial government did 60-odd years ago. So the King would never say give a full apology unless the British government gave the go-ahead. So that's what we saw here. As you said, £20 million was paid out by the British government to around 5,000 elderly Kenyans in 2013. And as far as the British government's concerned, a line has been drawn under it. However, there are descendants of those who were tortured and killed who demand the King delivers a full apology and the British government pay reparations.
Look, some of them are still banging on about stuff that was going on in the reign of Elizabeth I. For God's sake, she died in 1601 or something, did you? I mean, it's ridiculous. Where do you stop this?
Well, and yet they still clearly feel a lot of anger towards the British government at the time, 60 years ago, which I think is a shame for Buckingham Palace and those perhaps slightly more sympathetic with the King, because all of that, of course, is overshadowing from what he's doing today. And he's met this amazing guy a little bit earlier on. I don't know if we've got pictures of it or not, but he met a Corporal Samueli, who was 117 years old.
That's not him, to be clear.
That's not him.
He wouldn't be standing up. Not as well as that, anyway.
He's certainly not. We'll try and get pictures if we can. But he's a 117-year-old, thought to be the oldest living person in the world. But of course, you can't be guaranteed that because records are all over the place. But he fought in World War II. He's a World War II veteran, fought in Egypt and Burma, and he lost his medals because he had to hide them during the emergency of the 1950s-60s.
The Mau Mau uprising.
The Mau Mau uprising. If he was caught with medals presented to him from Britain, there's a possibility he would have been attacked for that. So he lost his medals then, and the King represented him with his medals this morning.
Nice story. And I've seen photographs of him Cameron, he looks extraordinary.
He does. He's in a wheelchair, but I don't know many 117-year-olds who wouldn't be. But he seemed, in a suit. He clearly was very proud to be there at the Commonwealth War Graves in Nairobi. And I think for the King as well, of course, it's medals which his grandfather George VI would have originally handed out.
Can we talk about the ancient tradition of making royals dance in embarrassing situations, Cameron?
Let's be honest, Camilla is not a brilliant dancer. And there she was. If we could got this clip of Camilla being forced
it is awkward,
into
isn't
a can with some people dressed in traditional gear. She looked very uncomfortable.
I'm sure she was very uncomfortable.
Why did they let them do it?
Well, it's a good photo op, isn't it? It gets them on the front pages. We're talking about it now, but I think it shows that the Queen is a good sport, doesn't it? She was also presented with a...
I don't think we ever saw Her Majesty the Queen get dragged into these
No,
dances.
she didn't actually, did she?
Never having
We've got the pictures of the 117-year-old.
Remind us what his name is, Cameron?
Corporal Samueli.
Right.
This is the King laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier, I believe. No, sorry, at the Commonwealth War Grave. So this is just before he is presented. He presents the medal to Corporal Samueli. It is at the same event, but I think it's probably 20 minutes or so before.
OK. We will try and get you the footage. We will have our panel in here in a little while. We'll discuss it with them as well.
But the Queen would never do the dance. I don't think you'd get Prince Philip doing much dancing either.
No, but in the age of social media, Andrew, you need to make sure that it's going to go viral on social media for the young people to engage with the monarchy.
On the whole, then, a successful trip, this, Cameron, do you think, despite all of this, you know, kind of tugging of forelocks about the past and what we did?
Yeah, well, I think so, because you have to remember back to Prince William and Catherine's tour in 2022, the Commonwealth tour.
Jamaica.
Not great pictures, greeting kids through wired fences and on the back of a Jeep, an open-top Land Rover, echoes of colonialism there. But I think it's less overshadowed, this particular tour. Yes, we are talking about the fact the King didn't offer a full apology, but we are still talking about all the engagements they are doing out there, such as...
And we should remind people, he is head of the Commonwealth, which is more than 50 countries, the majority of which are black, many of them black African, and they are proud and to be
oh, there we go. That's our little friend who's 117 years old.
So that's not Captain Samueli, but the one behind him is Captain Samueli. Yes, there's 4 different...
We are going to show you it eventually, we promise you.
But that's the gentleman receiving his medals there, isn't
it? There's 4 World War II veterans who received.
By the time we get you the image, he'll be 180.
Yes, he will be. And
Thank
so will
you,
we.
Cameron, and so will we. Right, and then you'll still look 60. Right, still to come. Slowly stopping the boats. Small boats, arrivals of migrants are down by a third compared to last year. The Home Office call it good progress. Is Rishi Sunak finally getting a grip of the problem?
And A1 might be the new word. AI might be the new word of the year. But GBNews' very own Nigel Farage has also had an impact-getting word which has gone into the Oxford Dictionary for the first time. We'll tell you what that is after this.
That's right, don't go anywhere.
Good morning, it's 10:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB Newsroom. Senior politicians and technology bosses are attending the world's first summit on the safety of artificial intelligence today at Bletchley Park. US Vice President Kamala Harris, Elon Musk and companies including Google, Meta and Microsoft will look at the risks of AI. The Prime Minister's hoping to put the UK at the centre of global efforts to monitor the technology, as well as attracting business investment. The government's pledged £38 million towards AI projects around the world, which aim to boost safe and responsible programming. The Rafah crossing from Gaza has opened to allow foreign nationals and some injured civilians into Egypt. The first group have now crossed the border in ambulances and are receiving treatment at a nearby field hospital. Up to 500 foreign passport holders are also expected to cross into Egypt. James Cleverly says UK teams are ready to assist British nationals as soon as they can leave. Aid trucks have also crossed, with the Foreign Secretary warning its vital life-saving aid enters into Gaza to ease the humanitarian crisis there. A former top civil servant's appearing at the COVID inquiry. Helen McNamara was Deputy Cabinet Secretary in 2020 and 2021 and played a key role in Britain's COVID response. She also made headlines for providing a karaoke machine for a party held at Downing Street during lockdown, resulting in a fine from the Metropolitan Police. 2 days of hearings have described a dysfunctional and indecisive culture as Boris Johnson's government struggled with its response to the pandemic. And amber weather warnings are in place for the south coast of England as Storm Ciarán approaches the UK. The Met Office says wind and rain could bring potential risk to life and property. Parts of Northern Ireland have already been flooded due to heavy rainfall and people have been warned not to travel. It comes less than 2 weeks after Storm Babette caused widespread damage across the UK. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2138 and €1.1506. The price of gold is £1,634.05 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,320 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
It's 10:38 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner.
So American Bully XLs will be added to the list of banned dogs in England and Wales.
Hurrah! From the 1st of February, illegal to own one without an exemption.
So joining us now is former Conservative MP Neil Parish. Good morning, Neil. It will be illegal to own one without an exemption. What does that mean? What kind of exemption could you have to continue to own one, do you think?
I mean, I think the exemption probably will be down to the temperament of the dog. They'll have to be neutered and they'll have to be muzzled when they go out. So I think there's some sort of safety there. I think it's interesting banning the breed because I think it's right to ban the breed. But of course, it's a crossbreed. You see, it's an American Pit Bull and an American Staffordshire Terrier actually crossed. The Kennel Club don't actually recognise it as a breed in this country. So I think that it'll take some administrating because I think, I'm a great believer when it's necessary to ban a breed, ban it, but it'll be about the enforcement. It'll be about will the police have the expertise to be able to know what the XL Bully is. And it's interesting if you look into the breed because it's actually bred for loyalty and actually is considered to be reasonably well tempered. And of course, a lot of these problems are the people that actually have them may well have them as status dogs to protect themselves, perhaps for illegal activities. And so I think we've got to be also concentrating on those that have the dogs, not just the dogs.
I hear that, Neil, but see, people who often say this ban is going too far, it's all about the owners, it's not about the dogs. These dogs should never have been around. They just, look at them. They're built like tanks, and they've killed, I think in 1 month this year, they killed a dog a day, and they are responsible for possibly 12 fatalities already, human fatalities. The dogs just shouldn't, we just don't want them.
No, I understand that, and I think it's right to ban them. But as I said to you, the key to making this work is not we do a lot of legislation in Parliament, and we have in the past. And I used to chair the Select Committee on Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, where we've looked into this, and it is all in the end about enforcing it as well as bringing in the law. So as we bring this law in, we have to find the dogs, and we have to make sure they're not bred. And of course, the trouble with a crossbred dog is they will start to it with other breeds. So we have to be active all the time to try and take these aggressive breeds out. But I will repeat, it's not just the dog, it is very often the owner.
What, Neil, will happen for dogs and owners who have them now? Like, what do they have to do before the end of the year? Will we literally see dogs being put down now?
I think, no, they don't have to be put down, but they do have to be neutered and they do have to be muzzled when they go out. And of course, if they do show any aggression, they will be put down. So it's a combination of those things. I think it's an interesting one where, like I said, I've been to sort of Battersea Dogs Home, seen Staffordshire Bull Terriers that are, actually very good tempered, and you do actually feel then it is a shame to put down a good tempered dog. The problem you've got, as you rightly say, is that these dogs are so powerful, when they are vicious, they will do real damage. And I think having such big, powerful dogs is not wise, and I think it's right for the ban. But like I keep repeating, we've got to properly enforce it. We're too keen in Parliament bringing in laws, and we've got to enforce them and make sure there's enough people out there to enforce it.
Neil, just finally, you mentioned Parliament. Parliament gets a lot of criticism because legislation's often badly drafted and they take too long to do things. They pulled their finger out on this one and got it done pretty quickly.
Yeah, Parliament when it needs to. I had 12 years in Parliament. It's amazing how quickly you can. And of course, what you do with something like this is you tag it on to another bill and you bring it in as an amendment, and that's how you bring it in fast. And I think that it's necessary. And like I said, what I do hope is the government and local authorities do have the necessary manpower and expertise to be able to enforce it, because right to bring in the law but even more so, it must be enforced, because that's what I found through the experience of inquiries, is a lot of these laws are in place, but they're not properly enforced.
OK, brilliant. Thank you, Neil. Neil Parish there. We're joined in the studio now by former Labour advisor and writer Scarlett Maguire and former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson. Scarlett, it's interesting, isn't it, when you're hearing that? Because, of course, it's lovely that this legislation has been pushed through. I think the majority of people would agree this is a common-sense move. But what amount of police resources are going to be spent on this?
Well, I was just thinking, I thought it was a really good interview, and he absolutely explained it really well, is have they actually consulted, a terrible word, but have they worked out how it's going to happen? Because clearly these dogs are incredibly dangerous, and we don't know how many of the fatalities. And there are lots and lots of people who've just been attacked. Really, really viciously attacked by these dogs. And we don't know how much it is about the breeding, but you know, who is going to say that dog should be muzzled? And they're quite. I wouldn't know what an XL bully was. And I know what a staffy is, because I know one in particular that is very badly behaved and frankly is never allowed out without a lead. How bad? I mean, the problem with these big dogs is they are really dangerous, and there's no point in having another wretched law.
And if you remember the Dangerous Dogs Act, which the major government brought in,
it's supposed to be the worst piece of legislation.
It didn't work, did it? They made a complete haulix of it.
It doesn't work at all, and this isn't going to work because you're relying now on police officers on the street to genetically identify which an XL pit bull is, and you can't do it. It's not actually possible. This is going to get clogged up in the courts with people saying, prove my dog is this breed, because it's not actually a recognised breed. Maybe it's going to punish the responsible owners rather than the criminals, and these are the ones that they're going to ignore. This they're not exactly notice. I mean, Scarlett just nailed it straight away. It's like, it's not going to work.
And if you're a police officer on your own and there's a bloke
with one of those
snarling, and are you really going to push your luck as a police officer? Because you'd be very worried about it.
And also, you know, it's just to what extent. I saw a guy walking down the street with one of these off a lead not long ago, and it was almost like he was carrying a gun. The body language, the trousers put all the way down so you could see his underpants, you know, with the type. And I was just watching and I thought, that is really scary, that this dog was massive with these massive shoulders, and it was quite obviously a weapon. You know, maybe this should all, I mean, like we said, any that are, they have to be on a lead, they have to be muzzled, and perhaps do we bring in dog licences, Dawn? Are we getting to the point where people should have a licence to have a dog?
It's like, you know, the responsible dog owners, and lots of people that do own these dogs, by the way, are dog whisperers, they call themselves. They're dog psychologists, and they get them as rescue dogs. And they've been attacked by these dogs as well, so it's not just the owners, but they're responsible owners, and they're trying to do, you know, make the animals safe. But it's the irresponsible ones. It's the chap you just referred to. You know, it's illegal to carry a gun, illegal to carry a knife, but it's not illegal to walk a dog that looks like this down the street.
But here's the other point. So these dogs have to be kept on a lead. If one of those flipping dogs wants to go flying down the street, who's going to be able to hang on to that lead unless they're Charles Atlas?
So one is saying that once again that the government is bringing in legislation so that they can say that they've done something, but actually nothing's going to happen.
But maybe it will make people think twice about getting one.
And it will make them maybe socially unacceptable.
People who don't really want one, but not the people like Bev was talking about, the man, I'm really macho, I'm going to frighten you. That's what, they're going to want them even more.
Right, talking of police officers, what about these cops ripping down posters of Israeli children? Dawn, this was in Manchester. Do you think they were right to take these pictures down from the front of this chemist?
Of course they're not. I mean, the background to this, we think, we're not 100% sure, but it appears to be, the chemist appears to be owned by Muslim owners, and so somebody may have been putting them up for a political reason. But no, it is not right for the police to remove them. It's profoundly offensive. These are wanted posters for missing posters for children and babies who are missing. So they should not. It's wrong and it's upsetting.
There's no division, is there, John, between people who want to get these kids back?
No, of course not. But the thing is, using that word division, it is incredibly divisive again. And I was telling Scarlett before we came in here, two friends. One's a Muslim journalist, the other one is a Jewish journalist. And they're not particularly religious, but it's very obvious they are of their faith, and they are now terrified. They are both scared. It's not just anti-Semitism here, it's Islamophobia that's on the way. And it seems to be affecting women more. I mean, they are scared to literally go out and do their jobs at the moment.
That's really shocking.
Yeah, and well, we know that, I mean, as you say, particularly women, that Jewish women feel frightened about leaving their homes, as do Muslim women, particularly if they're wearing the hijab. What's so terrible about this is, as you say, these are children who are missing, and it's been politicised, so that I mean, you know, Michelle Dewberry said that when she started talking about how sad she felt about the children in Gaza, she got this massive hate thing saying you're in favour of Hamas. Actually, you know, there are children who've been killed on both sides. And also both sides are saying, you know, oh no, you're lying about this, you're lying about this. I mean, what's happened is absolutely terrible. And the people who one has so much respect for are the parents who've lost their children and who've got together, you know, I mean, Arab and Israeli, and said, this has got to stop. This isn't getting us anywhere. All this hatred just means more children
the
dying.
children are always innocent. They're kids.
Well, of course they're kids.
They're and they are innocent pawns in this conflict.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
But the worst part is that Hamas will use these children as tools.
Yeah.
And they do. And they do.
The population of the Gaza Strip is incredibly long. I think over 50% of them are children.
Under 18,
So they are going to be the ones that are suffering. And they didn't vote for Hamas.
Look, of course.
Well, nobody's voted for Hamas since 2006.
Exactly.
It's a dictatorship.
Look, as soon as Hamas did that absolutely atrocity, I mean, I remember saying I could write the script. Israelis going to come, they're going to kill lots of Palestinians. That's what Hamas knew.
That's what they wanted.
Absolutely.
Acts of provocation. Right, let's look at things a bit closer to home. The number of migrants crossing the Channel has fallen by a third compared to last year, Dawn.
Oh, yeah, marvellous. Government doing a great job, aren't they? I think it's called autumn. Sorry, that's the end of my discussion. The number of migrants crossing the Channel has fallen because the weather's got worse, full stop.
There's not much wind.
No,
apart from in this studio.
Yeah, there's a lot of hot air in this studio.
Are the Home Office even giving us any reason to claim credit for this, Scarlett?
No, they're just saying, see, numbers have gone down,
They're saying it's good progress.
If we had a Home Office Minister on, they'll say cooperation is working better with the French, we're giving French more money, security checks are better, the deterrent effect of Rwanda, if it ever happens, is putting people off.
The bib of Stockholm.
Yeah, there is some evidence, by the way, Scarlett, that some migrants are now choosing to go to Ireland rather than England because they do fear the Rwanda thing. There is some anecdotal evidence of that.
Right, and then but
not enough in my mind, because I want Rwanda to start tomorrow.
Right, well, and I think Rwanda doesn't deal with anything and is just appalling. But that's the difference between us. I mean, I agree with Dawn.
There are several, Scarlett, differences between the two of you, to be fair.
Yeah, almost everything. Except bully dogs.
Everything.
Bully dogs. I think we agree on bully dogs, then.
I think we do.
Well, the ministers are saying that they think it's the threat of the Rwanda asylum deal is putting people off. I'm not sure I can subscribe to that. And that the returns agreement with Albania has had an impact. That's definitely worked. And in October of this year, sorry, let me just find the facts because it is quite interesting. October last year saw 6,900 migrants reach British shores, but this October was only 1,700. That does sound like a significant drop.
What we should do is check what the weather patterns were.
I did.
Where's Jim Dale when you need him?
Which one was the windiest month? I think we can probably work it out.
I know. That's it. That's all it is.
And actually, I spend quite a lot of time in Brighton at the weekends, and I've noticed how the sea, people are not swimming in the sea so much this autumn because it's been so windy.
Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, and I know how often I've gone in, because I think, blimey, I'm not going in that.
I admire you for going in at all. But I think the Albanian thing is really interesting, because what it shows is that if they could get the processes up like they used to do and actually process people within a few weeks. An awful lot of people would go, but an awful lot of people wouldn't come because they'd realise, like the Albanians, no point because you just get 7 million.
And they're losing £4,000 each in the process if they're paying these terrible,
potential criminals. And obviously we've got the Supreme Court is still waiting. We're still waiting to see whether the Rwanda deal will be abandoned or whether they'll be able to carry that through, Dawn. Will it make any difference? I think if they can get that pushed through and we can get those planes off the ground, that has got to be a deterrent.
You hope so. You do hope so.
They've got to try it, haven't they?
Yeah, we've got to do something.
Yeah.
The problem I've got with everything that's suggested at the moment, from army bases to barges to Rwanda to bunging the French, God knows how many million we're up to now. Exactly. It's like none of them are working for a start, and there is always someone saying, no, oh my God, that makes you a horrible racist country. Other countries do this and get away with it. Germany use army bases. That's fine.
Yeah.
Why does it make us so bad when we try to suggest something like that? I don't understand that.
But the problem with all those things, so if you go down to Weymouth, to Portland, where the Bibi Stockholm is, it has united the place.
Yes.
Because either they think it's terrible that the migrants are on there, or they think we don't want them anyway.
Yeah. Well,
and also, what are they doing, having 3 meals a day, when we don't get...
I know.
And the army bases... The people around it don't want them. I mean, that's...
We've got to move on.
Gym, cinema.
Yeah. No, don't worry.
Cinema.
You're here to talk, Scarlett, so that's marvellous. Right, Scarlett and Dawn will be back with us a little bit later.
She'll always talk, that
And in the next few moments, GB News Northwest reporter Sophie Reaper is going to bring us a report on the 20-year anniversary of 14-year-old Charlene Downes' disappearance in Blackpool. Do you remember that? We're GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. A day of blustery showers for many of us before it turns increasingly wet and windy as Storm Ciarán arrives overnight. Now, first, the more persistent wet weather is affecting central and northern parts of Scotland. That is edging northwards, followed by heavy downpours into Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland, and also scattered showers and sunny spells further south. The best of any drier weather will be towards the southeast, although it's going to be blustery for many of us, and it's going to feel on the cool side. Now, overnight, we're going to see the approach of this area of low pressure named Storm Ciarán because of the risk of disruptive and in some places damaging winds around southern coastal areas in particular. Initially, it's the wet weather that could cause problems. Overnight, that sweeps into the south of the UK. And then the winds strengthen. Southwest England, most at risk of the strongest winds during the early hours of Thursday. In places, gusts of 80 or 85 miles an hour. But they will mostly be affecting the coast, and then that swathe of strong winds through the day on Thursday moves along the coastline to affect, by the afternoon, the southeast of England, with, again, coastal areas most at risk of some very strong winds, 70, 80 miles an hour. Inland, more like 50 or 60 miles an hour, and much lighter winds further north, although it will be a blustery day with heavy rain in places. Bye-bye.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's on your teeth.
It's on your teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
It's 11 a.m. on November the 1st. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Thank you for joining us this morning. So, Downes' disappearance 20 years ago today. 14-year-old Charlene Downes went missing in her Lancashire seaside town home of Blackpool, and our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper is going to bring us the latest.
Tipsy travellers, following the increase in drunk and disorderly behaviour on flights, some people are arguing selling booze on planes should be bad. Well, not me and Bev.
No way. And station locked down. A pro-Palestine ceasefire rally took place in London Liverpool Street Station yesterday evening. Look at that, more than 500 people joined the sit-in protest. Let's take a listen to what passengers were greeted with.
Incredible. Ticket office U-turn. At last, the government has cancelled those mad rail industry plans for the mass closure of ticket offices in England. A great success, we think.
And well done you at home for getting involved in that campaign to keep ticket offices open. It was the biggest response to a public inquiry ever.
Really important. And we want to tell you, breaking news, a third McDonald's in Birmingham has been targeted by protesters who've unleashed hundreds, or dozens at least, of mice, which they died as part of their protest about Israel defending itself with Hamas.
Yeah, we're going to try and get you that footage. It's really disturbing, actually. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email, as always. First, though, here's Rhiannon Jones with your latest news.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. Senior politicians and technology bosses are at the world's first summit on the safety of artificial intelligence at Bletchley Park. US Vice President Kamala Harris, Elon Musk and companies including Google, Meta and Microsoft are assessing the risks of AI. The Prime Minister hopes to put the UK at the centre of global efforts to monitor the technology, as well as attracting business investment. The government's pledged £38 million towards AI projects around the world, which aim to boost safe and responsible programming. The Rafah crossing from Gaza has opened to allow foreign nationals and some injured civilians into Egypt. The first group has now crossed the border and the wounded are receiving treatment at a nearby field hospital. Up to 500 foreign passport holders are also expected to cross into Egypt. James Cleverly says UK teams are ready to assist British nationals as soon as they can leave. Aid trucks have also crossed into Gaza, with the Foreign Secretary warning it's vital to easing the humanitarian crisis there. It's not clear how long the crossing will remain open. Well, it comes as the Israeli military says 9 of its soldiers have been killed during its ground offensive into Gaza. Explosions have been heard this morning as Israel's bombardment continues. The Israel Defense Forces says it's hit 11,000 Hamas targets so far. The IDF also claims an airstrike yesterday killed a senior Hamas commander it says was a ringleader of the attack on the 7th of October. Palestinian officials say 50 Gazans were killed and another 150 injured in that strike. Campaigners back here in London have projected the words "ceasefire now" onto the Houses of Parliament in the colours of the Palestinian flag. It is organised by Save the Children and other charities that say Rishi Sunak must put lives above politics and back calls for a ceasefire. They're handing a petition with over 300,000 signatures over to the government. In other news, a former top civil servant is answering questions at the COVID inquiry. Helen McNamara was Deputy Cabinet Secretary in 2020 and 2021 and played a key role in Britain's COVID response. She told the inquiry a short time ago that Boris Johnson displayed a breezy confidence regarding the pandemic, which she found jarring. She also criticised her former colleagues at the Cabinet Office, saying it had been very difficult to obtain basic details ahead of her appearance at the inquiry. House prices increased by 0.9% in October, which experts say reflects the limited supply of properties on the market. Nationwide's market index showed an increase on last month's figures, though average prices across the UK are down 3.3% compared to last year. The Building Society says market activity remains weak, with the number of mortgages approved in September down 30%. Doctors are urging people to get their COVID and flu jabs after it was revealed millions of those who are eligible haven't yet taken up the offer. Cases of flu and COVID are expected to rise significantly during the colder months. A new campaign called Get Winter Strong aims to encourage people to get the jab, even if they don't typically come forward. Doctors say it's one of the most important things any of us can do to protect ourselves from serious illness. Hundreds of schools in Scotland are closed today as support staff walk out in a dispute over pay. Janitors, cleaners and pupil support assistants are among those striking. It's part of rolling action by Unison members after they rejected an earlier pay offer. More walkouts are expected next week. Amber weather warnings are in place for the south coast of England and parts of Pembrokeshire and Wales as Storm Ciarán approaches the UK. The Met Office says wind and rain could bring potential risk to life and property. Parts of Northern Ireland have already been flooded due to heavy rainfall and people have been warned not to travel. It comes less than 2 weeks after Storm Babette caused widespread damage across the UK. And the King and Queen are in Kenya on day 2 of their state visit. Their Majesties are celebrating animal welfare and environmental conservation with a tour of an elephant orphanage on the Queen's agenda. The King will also visit an urban forest to highlight the importance of green spaces in cities. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car and digital radio, and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back over to Andrew and Beth.
You just saw that clip again of the Queen Camilla. It's torture to watch.
It is torture to watch. It is torture. Can you imagine being
dragged
sober and having to dance in front of the world with people that you've never met who are actually really, really good at dancing?
But we're now managing to share with a donkey and a dog, not dancing at all. We'll get it right eventually. There she is, dancing. Look at her face. Absolute mask of horror.
It's like it's
She's
just
thinking, why
mortifying.
did I say yes when he proposed to me? Why did the Queen say she will be known as Queen Consort? I mean, that is just...
It's mortifying, isn't it? Well done, Queen Camilla. Just, keep putting one foot in front of the other in bad timing.
King, country and Commonwealth, we're proud of.
Right, what have you been saying at home? We're talking about these protests at Liverpool Street Station last night in relation to the Middle East conflict. I'm appalled by the terrifying scenes last night, very intimidated. says, Jules, Angela said, I noticed none of the protesters were wearing a poppy.
No.
Anne says, I don't know why everyone's so angry. People should be allowed to protest. It's important that we stand up for the Palestinian people.
Hang on, what they were saying, and Sarah Vine made that point, was free Palestine. This isn't about freeing Palestine. This is about Hamas, a terror group, waging war on Israel and Israel striking back. Hamas want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. It's not about free Palestine at all.
A peaceful rally would be Israelis and Arabs, Jews and Muslims coming together and calling for a ceasefire. We would all be on board with that.
Yeah.
This is, but this is just division, and it just feels like the volume is turning up on it the whole time. And Barry says these protesters are just mindless sheep. We were talking about the XL Bully dogs ban as well, and Elizabeth says any death by any animal against a human is absolutely wrong. It might sound bad, but how many of these dogs were off-lead? How many were considerate owners? Who wants to come and tell my daughter that the pet she has that is walked 3 times a day, never off the lead, when playing on a field away from others, is still on a lead, might be put down, as people like yourself keep stating, put them all down.
But the dogs aren't going to be put down.
No, that was why I asked the question.
They've got to be registered properly, and if they behave badly and threaten other people, then they will be put down. But they're not going to be put down. That's not what the law says. That's not what the law change says.
Absolutely. And we've been discussing the COVID inquiry. We've been looking at Helen McNamara, their former civil servant.
She was the cabinet secretary.
And I didn't realise she was quite a significant character in that drama, the Partygate drama on Channel 4. If you've watched that.
She was the female star.
She was. It's the woman who got the karaoke machine in. Anyway, we are watching that. We're not bringing you that in full detail because we might lose the room. But somebody is watching it, and we will let you know what happens in that inquiry today, because she was certainly a key figure. John says, I'd like to know who are the ranks of people sitting in front of laptops. Why are they there? What are they doing? Are they necessary? And how much they cost in the public purse?
40 million.
Great point.
40 million. Lawyers.
Lawyers, wall-to-wall lawyers, because they tend to do very well out of every situation.
They always do. Now, 20 years ago today, 14-year-old Charlene Downes went missing in her Lancashire seaside town of Blackpool.
That's right.
Police say there's no evidence to suggest she's still alive, and her body's never been found.
However, after an investigation spanning almost 2 decades, Lancashire Constabulary are today launching a fresh appeal. For information, our North West of England reporter, Sophie Reaper, has this report.
My daughter's been missing since Saturday night. We thought she'd been back by now, but she hasn't returned.
This CCTV footage shows Charlene Downes on what's believed to be the last day of her life. On the 1st of November 2003, the 14-year-old girl disappeared without a trace. She'd spent the evening in Blackpool, the seaside town where she lived. Shortly after 6 p.m, her mother saw Charlene with her sister, Rebecca. They spoke briefly, not knowing this would be the last conversation they would ever have.
I said, don't you be late home? She said, I won't, I'll be in before 10. I said, OK, all right, make sure you are. Next thing I knew, they walked down in the direction of the Winter Gardens, and that was the last time I ever saw her. I never saw her after that.
From there, Charlene visited various places, including the Carousel Bar on Blackpool's pier. It's believed that the 14-year-old was murdered just hours later.
We'll always live in hope, but hope is all we have left. I will always do that until I take my last breath, live in hope that one day the answers will come. We can't do anything else really, hope is all we have left.
But someone out there has got the answer.
Oh yeah.
But then they've grown up in the last 20 years. They were scared, let's come up and then, you know.
They need to do it for Charlene, not for us, but for Charlene, to give her that, we need that closure.
Whilst investigating her disappearance, Lancashire Police uncovered a dark underbelly behind the bright lights of Blackpool's promenade. They found that Charlene was just one of around 60 girls in the area who'd been victim to a form of child sexual exploitation. Gruesome details would emerge around how Charlene had allegedly been killed, but ultimately no one has ever been found guilty of her murder. Now, 2 decades on from Charlene's disappearance, Lancashire Police say they're still committed to getting justice for her family.
I'm appealing to those people who know what happened to Charlene and for whatever reason over the last 20 years have not come forward and told us what happened and who's responsible for her disappearance, because Charlene's family have spent 20 years not knowing, agonising over what happened to her, and no closure or justice.
20 years on, Lancashire police say they will never stop their investigations. And as the days, months, years pass by, her family still cling to the hope of some answers. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
How awful.
What a sad story. 20 years.
And
I
wasn't familiar with that story.
No,
Thank you, Sophie.
I don't remember it. So she would be 34 now.
Yeah.
She'd probably have had her own family, her own kids. And you have to compare it to the Madeleine McCann, who's never really been out the headlines in 14 or 15 years. Pinched, wasn't she, on holiday in Portugal with the parents were there, but they were very media savy. They looked great in front of a camera.
And they kept it in the headlines.
Very middle-class family, weren't they? Doctor and a radiologist.
Yeah.
I think that's very sad. Well, let's hope that appeal does some good.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Right. Yesterday, 5 men were jailed for more than 7 decades for non-recent child sexual exploitation in Rochdale.
Well, here to tell us all about it is GB News investigations reporter Charlie Peters. And by the way, Charlie did some great reporting in the Middle East after the war broke out.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, there has been some justice in the northwest yesterday after the news you just heard about Charlene Downes, that very sad story. We do have news about 5 men being jailed for non-recent sexual assault charges and indeed charges regarding rape as well. Their surnames are 2 men by the name of Ghani, Hussein, Kazmi and a man called Rhodes from Blackpool. This is for the abuse of 2 girls between 2002 and 2006. Some of the details of the offending are extremely horrific, but the abuse started in 2002 when girl A had a chance encounter with one of the men surnamed Ghani, and that started a cycle of abuse, the typical routine that we so sadly often hear about with these incidents of abuse gangs, plied with alcohol and drugs, picked up outside their school, often met while still in their school uniforms. And this incident was only reported to police in 2015, when this girl A, told on a parenting course, detailed how she had been raped and abused by these men well over a decade before. Well, Rochdale Council passed this information to the police, and the police, after this sentencing finally achieved yesterday, said that this is a multi-agency approach. It's taken a long time, but we've got there, and they thank the victims for all their support.
But even if she raised the alarm at 2015 and it's now 2023, that's another 8 years that took.
Speaking this morning to Maggie Oliver, a former Greater Manchester
she's a great woman.
Greater Manchester Police whistleblower, she said that many of the survivors she's working with now are saying that the police and the council are taking far too long, and the CPS has a tremendous backlog of trials. Of course, we've seen this covered very readily over the last couple of years. But when it comes to these victims, these survivors of abuse, keeping their trust in the authorities is so key to achieving that justice, keeping them engaged with the work. And an 8-year gap, campaign is saying this morning, that's just far too long. It's just far too long. And so many of those survivors from that period, a 2-decade gap, of course, so much of the reporting from that time was a failure. Greater Manchester Police has admitted they didn't do enough. They are now worrying that they're going to lose the engagement of those girls in ongoing investigations.
And often those girls, Charlie, in these terrible grooming gang stories were girls from difficult backgrounds, maybe broken
chaotic
homes,
family life,
perhaps in care,
vulnerable,
and you sort of think perhaps the authorities just didn't care quite as much.
Classism is clearly an element of the failure for the reporting from 2 decades ago. There's no doubt about that. In many of the cases across the country, up to 50 different towns where we've seen cases of child abuse rings occurring in this style, it's clear that a classist element was there.
And you say the victim was on a parenting course, so she's now presumably was a new mother in 2015 when she made the statements of what had happened.
Well, so many of these victims are young women with their own families and their own lives, and I've met many of them over the last year investigating this work with GB News, and many of them say, you know, they fear that the situation they went through in the early noughties and some in the 90s, there hasn't been a sufficient improvement, and they're now raising their own children in
Very
those
briefly,
towns.
Charlie, there was also the race element too about the authorities not wanting, because often the gangs were from an ethnic background.
Political correctness has undoubtedly been prioritised over the safety and security of women. This is an ongoing testimony made by victims, and indeed many experts in the field support that view as well. And it appears to be the case that much of what happened in Rochdale, particularly with the failures in the early noughties to look into this investigation, was driven by a preference to look the other way if abusers were of a British-Pakistani background.
It was British-Pakistani, wasn't it? Yeah.
Thanks, Charlie. Charlie Peters. So, the government has announced a U-turn over its plans to shut down the majority of railway station ticket offices in England.
But I mean, good job and all. We've been saying that right from the beginning here on GB News. The Rail Delivery Group, they don't deliver much, do they, says, while these plans won't now be taken forward, we'll continue to look at other ways to improve passenger experience while delivering value for the taxpayer.
Well, joining us now is MP and member of the Transport Select Committee, Greg Smith. Good morning, Greg. This is a triumph for people power. Just tell us what the response was like when this suggestion was made that we were going to lose ticket officers manned by human beings.
Yeah, I had a lot of emails from my constituents. There are a lot of railway stations that my constituents use, particularly on the Chiltern line. And people were really unhappy that the ticket offices were going to be closed. I think what we do have to do, though, because the Transport Select Committee is running an inquiry on accessible transport at the moment, taking evidence from people who use wheelchairs or perhaps are blind or partially sighted, and some of the experiences they have on the railway and other modes of transport is really, really bad. Things that you would never expect from this day and age of simply not getting the help that they need. And so we do need to have that national conversation about how railway stations can be made more welcoming and accessible, particularly for people that have specific needs and need specific help.
Consequences I read this morning about this decision. This is going to be passed on in higher rail fares for passengers. That surely can't be acceptable. They're already among the most expensive in Europe.
Rail fares have got to a point where people really take in a huge intake of breath when they see the increases every year. My constituency is just 50 miles north of London, and it's a 50 quid return if you want to go in at peak hours from Hadnam and Tame Parkway. It is an enormous amount of money. If anything, we need to be looking at how we can get rail fares down, not up. And there is a consequence to having that level of staff at stations, but if commuters want it and demand it, then ticket offices clearly are here to stay. But we need that additional support in stations, particularly for people in wheelchairs or who perhaps can't see that well.
Greg, this is just one example where technology is replacing human beings. We've got Rishi Sunak at an AI conference getting very excited about all of these changes. For you as a politician, are there enough conversations being had about the implications of these significant social changes for people, whether they are employees or just service users or customers in a business? It feels like we've just all assumed this is all good news.
Probably not, is the honest answer to that question. It's not just railway ticket offices. One of the other huge explosive issues in my constituency is high street banks, where technology seems to have taken over. My constituency is 335 square miles. There is one high street bank still standing across that geography in the town of Princes Risborough. And we're all guilty of it, right? We all actually use the apps on our mobiles or banking on our laptops or whatever it might be, but there are still huge chunks of society who rely on access to cash, both to put cash in as well as take cash out, and access those services in person. I think, I'm no Luddite. I'm not against technology improving our lives, but I'm not sure that we have fully thought through the implications to vast swathes of society at the moment of full-on automation.
And just briefly, Greg, because we are up against time, older people in particular do not necessarily want to use an app, do not want to do online banking, and I'm not particularly old, but I'm one of them.
Yeah, we've got to go with personal choice as well, haven't we? We forget that sometimes, that for many people, they just don't want to use an app. They don't want to use a website. They want the satisfaction. Actually, maybe it's nothing to do with banking or buying a ticket. Maybe it's actually to do with the fact that they might be living on their own and actually quite like the human interaction, the social interaction of going into a high street bank or a ticket office. There is a societal duty there for some of our most vulnerable.
Or just pick up the phone and speak to a human being when you've got a complaint with any sort of organisation.
Well, when was the last time you were able to do that?
Never, Greg.
She's being very controversial.
And that is the problem. Can I ask you one more controversial question before you go? Do you like a drink on an aeroplane?
Yeah, but not too many. Yeah, it's nice to have a cold beer on your takeoff. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, you've thrown forward to our next item, Greg Smith. Thank you for joining us, because we are going to be discussing that. It's about whether you should be allowed to have a drink on an aeroplane.
Yeah, because some airlines are considering getting rid of them. That'll probably be to save money. That should be a feisty debate next. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
11:25, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So in 2022, there were 1,028 cases of disruptive behaviour and air rage reported by UK airlines, which is nearly the triple number reported in 2019.
I'm sorry, it doesn't sound a lot to me.
A
You think how
thousand.
many thousands of flights go out from British airports every day?
This is true.
But now, so some people think drinks on flights are not just disruptive, but actually they should be banned.
Apparently there have been many more instances of in-flight nudity and violence. And with that in mind, is it time to just pack it in, stop selling alcohol on flights?
No.
Well, joining us to debate this is journalist Julie Cook and Communication Officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Reem Ibrahim. Good morning, ladies. Let's start with you, Julie. We all like a little drink on the aeroplane, don't we? It's a British tradition. It's almost obligatory to have a pint before you get on the plane, even if it's 6 o'clock in the morning.
Gin and tonic in my case.
Yes, and I've been there and done that. In fact, I once got absolutely hammered, as the young people say, on a plane from Britain to Canada and ended up very, very unwell at the other end. So I have been there and done this. However, my argument now is, now that I'm older and I go on flights with my children, I do not want them to experience drunken louts 35,000 feet up in the air with access to doors that can let in air and possibly make you crash. So no, I think it's time it was banned.
Reem, what do you think about that? It sounds like Julie's saying, well, I had a lovely time, but now I don't want to do it anymore. The youngsters can't do it.
Good point.
That is exactly what it sounds like. I had fun when I was in my 20s and now nobody else can. I mean, look, ultimately nobody has done that. Nobody has been so drunk that they've opened up the emergency exits on the airplane. What does happen is that people can be incredibly rude when they are drunk. They can, obviously we've seen these non-violent incidents on airplanes where people have been behaving in these kind of ways. Ultimately though, banning it won't solve the problem. There's nothing stopping people from hopping over to the Wetherspoons right before they board their flight. I think everyone does that anyway. So ultimately what needs to be done is that, the airplane companies themselves need to take some responsibility. And they themselves have to control the amount of alcohol that is being given to those that are more drunk. I mean, if we look at in any regular bar or any regular pub, if you've had too much to drink, they will stop serving you. The same exact thing should happen on planes.
Of course, the argument would be, well, people get on the planes, they're already legless because they've had a 2-hour wait in departures.
Shouldn't let them on then.
But Julie, I hate the idea that the majority of people have to suffer because of the actions of a stupid minority. Just because those idiots can't control themselves, why should we have to suffer?
I do agree with that, and I would agree with that in any other context, except for being that high in the sky in an incredibly dangerous, enclosed environment. As you mentioned, there have been cases where planes have had to divert to other airports because of one or two drunk people, or people have become violent, or they've become aggressive to the stewards and stewardesses, and other people's holidays have been ruined. So I think it would be fine if it's in a bar where you can chuck people out, but when you're 35,000 feet in the air and you're trapped with these people, it's a different matter.
We have to be worried, though, don't we? Whenever, Reem, people start talking about doing things for our own safety, I start to get quite worried that this is going to be overreach.
Absolutely, and this is sort of where the health lobbyists and nanny state zealots tend to get in our way. And ultimately, a regular couple that only get to go to Benidorm once a year, that are struggling to make ends meet, have saved up for this lovely holiday, and are now being told they can't enjoy a nice glass of shandy on their way to Benidorm. I mean, that really is the impact of these kind of implementations of these kind of bans. It's not just 20-year-olds on their stag do. It's actually it tends to be the people that have been working incredibly hard that want to enjoy their holiday. And ultimately, for me, when I go on holiday, the holiday starts at the airport. We start having fun then. And I think that most people would agree, just because a small minority, we really are talking about a very small minority of people that behave in this way, we shouldn't ruin it for the rest of us.
Julie, you are just a miserable old killjoy.
No, I've been there, I've done that. I liked to drink when I was younger, but I really think an enclosed, dangerous environment like a plane where you cannot escape needs some kind of control.
Maybe it should just be that the steward should have a little more training, perhaps, a little bit more training on how to control a drunk person, in the same way that police officers, a great police officer is able to diffuse a situation if someone's had too much to drink outside a nightclub. Maybe we just had to add that, Julie. Would that keep you happy?
It would help, definitely would help. And I think that, as a halfway measure, perhaps would be to limit people. But then I think people like me would get angry about that. If you limit people to 2 drinks, they're going to say, oh, no, but I want 5 drinks. So, you can't win. It's kind of all or nothing.
You can't limit everyone. You can't limit everyone. You've got to make it so that if you've behaved badly, then you can't drink anymore. But the rest of us should be able to drink as much as we want.
Okay, all right. Thank you, ladies.
Go and have a drink. Go and have a drink to celebrate.
Julie Cook there and Reem Ibrahim. The only time I've got slightly aggressive on a plane is when someone asks me to wear a mask. So don't ask me to not drink and not wear and to cover up my face because I don't live in Iran.
Now, a little clarification here. McDonald has been hit with more mice being put in by these mad protesters over Israel and Gaza. I said 100 mice have died. What I meant was 100 mice have been died in horrible multicolours. Cruel.
That's right. That's
so cruelty to animals.
Right. Another attack. So we're going to be bringing you all of that. And what are they thinking?
Yeah.
According to a new study, cats have 276 facial expressions. I wonder what face they'd make if they saw all of those McDonald's mice.
They'd be licking their lips.
That and much more after your morning's news with Rhiannon.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 11:33. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Rafah crossing from Gaza has opened to allow foreign nationals and some injured civilians into Egypt. The first group has now crossed the border and the wounded are receiving treatment at a nearby field hospital. Up to 500 foreign passport holders are also expected to cross into Egypt. Meanwhile, aid trucks have entered into Gaza, with Foreign Secretary James Cleverly warning they're vital to easing the humanitarian crisis there. Senior politicians and technology bosses are at the world's first summit on AI safety at Bletchley Park. US Vice President Kamala Harris, Elon Musk, along with companies including Google, Meta and Microsoft, are assessing the risks of AI. The Prime Minister hopes to put the UK at the centre of global efforts to monitor the technology, as well as attracting business investment. Technology Secretary Michelle Donnellan says a declaration on AI safety has been agreed by attendees of the summit.
It commits us to deepening our understanding of the emerging risks of frontier AI. It affirms the need to address these risks as the only way to safely unlock these extraordinary opportunities. And it emphasises the critical importance of nation-states, developers and civil society in working together on our shared mission to deliver AI safety.
And a former top civil servant's answering questions at the COVID inquiry. Helen McManara was Deputy Cabinet Secretary in 2020 and 2021 and played a key role in Britain's COVID response. She told the inquiry a short time ago that Boris Johnson displayed a breezy confidence regarding the pandemic, which she found jarring. She also criticised her former colleagues at the Cabinet Office, saying it had been very difficult to obtain basic details ahead of her appearance at the inquiry. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2140 and €1.1508. The price of gold is £1,634.20 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,315 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
It's 11:35, still to come. Elon Musk and ChatGPT boss jet in for the UK's AI summit. But are you rolling out the red carpet?
No.
This is Britain's Newsroom. We'll have more than that, but this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
It's 11:39 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Right, let's see what you've been saying at home this morning. We were going to show you in a little while this footage of McDonald's. We're going to talk about that, where basically a protester do you say pro-Hamas or do you say pro-liberation of Palestine?
Well, we're not sure, but they're idiots, and it's the 3rd time they've done it.
And
unleashing mice, which they've dyed.
That's right. They took 100...
Put dyes on.
Yeah.
The 3rd time they've done this.
So I think they dyed them in the colour of the Palestinian flag. It's a lot of effort to go through.
It's also cruelty to animals.
Anyway, Alistair has said if McDonald's retaliated with cats when they released the mice, I'd have the Benny Hill theme tune on standby. And then we were talking about whether you should be allowed to drink on aeroplanes or not. And Grover says, I don't understand this obsession with alcohol. And while I don't object to alcohol consumption in moderation, I don't want another's drunken behaviour affecting me. And I choose not to drink alcohol because I like it too much. So I have a caffeine problem now. And Julia says...
water.
Absolutely not. A drink on a plane is the start of a wonderful holiday. Yet again, the majority of people who enjoy a drink and behave are penalised because of a minority of louts. If you don't want to drink on a plane, fine. But don't be a killjoy for those who do. And in fact, my mother has also messaged the show to say she went on a plane to Canada recently, 2 drunks on the plane, said it was a nightmare. She's told me off for suggesting I can't take a flight without having a drink. Sorry, Mum. Right.
She only has one, Mum. Apparently.
Free Palestine protesters have struck a 3rd McDonald in just 24 hours with a bizarre live stunt we've just been telling you. Let's have a look.
My days. Look at this. They've just dropped these off in McDonald's, all these rats in McDonald's. Oh my days.
There's a lot of rats.
Look at that.
So that's the third time they've done this at McDonald's in Birmingham. I don't know why. The reason they're targeting McDonald's, apparently, is because McDonald's have been providing food parcels for the Israeli soldiers. Haven't the Israeli soldiers suffered enough about having to eat McDonald's food parcels?
Frankly. They've done very well to, but also, how do you explain that to kids in McDonald's, Dawn? How does a parent explain to a child what that is meant to symbolise?
I can't explain it to you, and we're adults. I really can't. What is the thought process? Protesting, I get, right, OK, but what is the thought process? I feel really sorry for the mice, by the way. That goes and gets a bunch of mice, dyes them, and then release them at McDonald's. How did you even think of that?
It's medieval, isn't it, Scarlett? It's odd, it's dark.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a publicity stunt that actually persuades nobody of nothing. I mean, we already...
They're doing an Extinction Rebellion here. They'll just turn people off.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so odd about it, is you know, there are serious debates going on about Palestine and Israel. There's no question it's on every news bulletin. Everybody's talking about it. We really don't need a bunch of poor mice. I mean, you know, you just think, what is this?
I mean,
where do they get the mice from?
I don't know. I do understand how you can, because my cousin used to have a snake and may or occasionally fed it the odd live mice. But that was nature. OK, that's what they do, right? OK. But where you go and get hundreds of them from at a go?
There's obviously a big supply, because this is the third time they've done this.
Mice are us. I mean,
But I wonder what crime it is. I wonder what the person doing that could be arrested for. Maybe there's something quite clever about the fact that it doesn't qualify as a...
We should talk to the RSPCA about it, because they would know.
Animal cruelty?
You would think so.
I mean, stupidity isn't a crime yet, is it?
No.
Well, I mean,
if it was, there'd be a lot of people in prison.
I'm sure vandalism to McDonald's is a crime.
Yes.
I mean, I think there's no question about...
It's also disrupting their business, because it's going to put a lot of people off, because the idea you're going to go in and buy a burger when there are a load of mice have been running all over the floor. I don't think so.
Well, there are an awful lot of people who are mice-phobic.
Right.
I mean, really, and they will not go near it if they... So you're right, but it seems a very odd thing to do.
It's making a mockery of the serious debate about children on both sides dying. It's just ridiculous. It really is.
And then we go to the other protest, of course, which was a more conventional one at Liverpool Street Station yesterday in London's City of London, effectively. 500 chanting Free Palestine. This isn't about Free Palestine, is it? Isn't this about Israel at war with a terrorist organisation?
Well, I mean, the thing is, I'm sure it is... I don't know what each and every single person was doing there, their reason for being there. I mean, Free Palestine, yeah, OK, but they started chanting also about jihad and...
Did they really?
Yes, they did, and from the river to the sea. Now, we all know jihad can mean a religious journey, development,
Holy war.
But I'm not entirely sure that's the message they were getting.
But using river to the sea is a deliberately emotive phrase in a very febrile atmosphere and climate. Got that Labour MP suspended, even though he would argue, if you read what he said in context, it wasn't offensive.
Because you can mean, you know, from the river, that bit of the Palestinian place, to the sea, the Gaza Strip, for Palestine, Israel remains in the middle. You can read it as that. Lots of Jewish people don't.
I mean, it's a trigger for Jewish people.
It is,
I mean, there is absolutely no question that, and I mean, you know, the other side is that there are certainly people in the Israeli government who believe they wouldn't put the river to the sea because it's Palestine, but they believe that the whole of Palestine should be Israeli, right? So there is this serious debate on either side, and actually, you know, I mean, I don't know who were the people who were on the marches in Liverpool Street. Can I say that the people who go on the pro-Palestine marches are people mostly who believe in the two-state solution. They're not at war with either Israel or saying that what Hamas did, because it was horrendous. Everybody I know feels that what Hamas did... I mean, and I would say the vast majority of Muslims...
But these people, some of them were chanting holy war.
This is completely
inflammatory,
different.
and you could argue should get you arrested.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, they were committing a criminal offence, by the way. They could have been arrested. And instead, if you watch... there's lots of different bits of footage. If you watch some of the footage, the police officers are stopping frustrated passengers who simply want to get their train home after our day work.
Whack them over the head with a
Yes, they were
briefcase.
filming them, and the police were stopping them quite aggressively from filming. Whereas everybody sitting on the floor could have been arrested because that was a criminal offence.
I did notice most of them wearing masks, though. So, of course, they don't even have the...
I think that's got to be part of the review of what's happening at the moment, because if they're peaceful, freedom-loving, democratic demonstrators, Scarlett, why are they hiding their faces?
Well, they're hiding their faces because what they're doing is illegal and they don't want to be arrested. I mean, I think it's
but
about
the
that.
march in Westminster the other day, that wasn't an illegal march.
No, but most people did not wear masks.
A lot did.
Right. No, the people who are wearing masks are doing things that are illegal. Right. I mean, that's why they're wearing masks. The vast majority of people, you know, and we're talking tens of thousands on that march, you could see their faces. They were perfectly happy.
Do you think they shouldn't be allowed to wear masks on a march?
I think
I do think.
No, I think we're getting to the erasing freedom of speech and freedom. I mean, I think to start.
But if it's enabling them to carry out illegal acts, so the police don't know who they are.
No, but you can be arrested wearing a march.
Right.
I'm perfectly happy for people who are doing illegal things to be arrested.
Well, I mean, the thing is, because of the whole COVID thing about masks, they could claim, I mean, we all know it's not the truth, but they could claim we are wearing these masks because we are frightened of...
Because we're in a large gang of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Prove that
Which
one.
was always on my mind when I was talking about not wearing masks. Anyway, right. Talking of health and safety, meat should come with a graphic health warning like cigarettes. Do you agree, Dawn?
Well, the graphic health warning on the cigarette packet does seem to have had some effect. Less people smoke now.
A lot of that's to do with the price, I think.
Yeah, it's to do with the price. It's to do with places you can
It's to do with
smoke.
culture.
Pardon? Yeah, of course it is.
Banning fags from public places and restaurants.
Which is great.
Yeah,
which is one of the best things that ever happened.
I agree.
Yeah. Now, would it have the same... I mean, I don't eat meat. We've had this debate already. I don't eat meat. I haven't done for 40 years. So, but someone...
Is that for health reasons, though, or animal cruelty reasons?
It's not for animal cruelty reasons, I have to be honest. It is I just don't like it very much, and it's mainly for health reasons for me. But I don't want to be in a position where I'm sitting here saying, you should eat this, you shouldn't eat that. And I just think, you know, my husband eats meat, he eats literally anything. You know, we'll go to a country hotel for the weekend, and, you know, we'll drive through the fields, you know, in the spring, little lambs and everything, and go to a farm.
And he thinks that'd be a nice lamb chop.
And then he'll go to dinner and go, right, let's have some lamb then, shall we?
Yeah.
You've just been going, oh, look at the little lambs.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with eating that. I think it makes you... But, I mean, everything in moderation.
Absolutely.
I think with the food thing, smoking different, obviously, but I think if you fancy, you know, a piece of meat once a week...
So this is some food label research, Scarlett, wasn't it? Carried out by a PhD student, Jack Hughes. And so it's things like a label with the deforested area on the label with factory smoke in the distance and the text saying eating meat contributes to climate change. And he said in his research, reaching net zero is a priority for the nation and the planet. Yeah, thanks, Jack. Don't need you to tell me what to eat.
I mean, let's begin with it's never going to happen, because who markets meat? People who want to sell it. I mean,
yes,
the farmers...
Who's making fake meat? Bill Gates has bought up more farmland in America than anybody else, and he's now making fake meat that we will be encouraged to eat.
Well,
I'd rather have a steak.
I don't eat meat, and I don't eat meat.
You don't eat meat.
I don't eat meat, and I haven't done for 40 years because...
We are literally
Are you sisters?
Yeah.
We're twins.
We are born within 24 hours of each other.
Yes.
You do know that.
Really?
But it's because of the way animals are treated. I mean, which is not in this research at all, right? I mean, I think that the way animals are treated on farms. I mean, I saw it was an American film that I saw that put me off completely, and I just haven't done it since then. And I just don't think it's necessary to kill animals for food. However, I mean, I don't think this works, and I certainly don't impose it on anybody else. I mean, obviously, if you come to my house, you don't get meat. However...
What do we get? Some boring vegan food?
You get fish.
That's all right.
Right, which is probably I shouldn't do, and you get very nice vegetarian food, and that you've just made sure you never get an invitation.
Well, you know what?
Honestly.
There is a movement in this country or across the world now about metabolic health and how we would be better advised to eat what we should be eating as human beings, which is a little bit of meat and plenty of vegetables and a bit less carbohydrate. Meat is what we need. Protein.
Bev's mum,
a
glass of wine on a plane, Bev.
Yes.
But everything in moderation. I mean, the thing is with the whole green argument, unless you are literally eating fruit and vegetables vegetables that are grown in the season in the country you live. Flying a lot of more exotic produce in around the world is just as bad for the environment.
Global warming.
Yeah.
Global boiling.
Global boiling.
But we do need to think about the way animals actually are treated.
I agree.
And the way they're killed,
totally
right?
agree.
And the behaviour
And the raised and how healthy
abattoirs. And it's quite... So I have a very left-wing pro-eco son who...
Well, he gets that from you.
No, he is a carnivore. He eats meat.
Yeah.
My daughter... So I bought them both up
We just want to get this last
it.
story in because this is about expressions, and somebody has had enough time on their hands to look at the number of expressions that cats make.
Extraordinary.
And apparently cats have more than 300 facial expressions. I know. I mean, who would have the time?
Well, can I tell you, I have 2 cats, Rosie and Minnie, and they have just about one expression. It's indignation when they do not get their way.
Indignation that they're being looked after by Andrew.
No,
Why can't we have a better person?
They love their dad, and they ignore the other dad, but because I feed them, indignation.
This is the thing, isn't it? You just feed them and that's it. That's the expression.
That's
feed me now.
And if they don't get it, it's that look.
Who has sat and stared at a cat for that long that they just go there?
Yeah, quite.
Probably somebody got a research grant to do this work.
I think we need to see what's going to be going on GB News Live. It's Martin Daubney and Ellie this afternoon. Morning, both. What have you got coming up on the show?
Yes, good morning to you both. We've got an absolutely packed show, haven't we, Martin, coming up for you at 12 noon.
Yes, the latest from Israel. And we're delighted to say we've got Lord Daniel Finkelstein coming on. He's written an excellent column in today's Times saying people like Sadiq Khan calling for a ceasefire simply do not understand Israel. Plus, will Storm Kieran be paying you a visit? And, of course, latest exclusive images from the royal visit to Kenya.
And, of course, we're going to be talking about the mice attack. A third McDonald's now where dozens of mice have been released. Is that enough to put you off McDonald's for life? Certainly terrifying lots of people in Birmingham. So we're going to have Jack Carson live for us in Birmingham. So it's going to be an absolutely packed show with you 12 till 3 today.
Fantastic. Martin Daubney and Ellie Costello.
I've been off McDonald's for life anyway.
I quite like a McDonald's, I can't lie. I just do. Just from time to time.
Yeah.
I bet you've never eaten a McDonald's, have you, Dawn?
No, I've never eaten McDonald's in my entire life.
No? Scarlett?
I have, but, I mean, they are fatty and horrible.
Yeah, I've not eaten one for 30 years.
Well, look, we will be back tomorrow morning at 9:30, and as we just heard from Ellie and Martin, lots more coming up this afternoon. First, though, we know there's a storm coming, right? Kieran, isn't it? Storm is coming.
Where do they get these stupid names from?
So hopefully we will be here tomorrow, but here is the weather.
Hi there, it's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. A day of blustery showers for many of us before it turns increasingly wet and windy as Storm Kieran arrives overnight. Now, first, the more persistent wet weather is affecting central and northern parts of Scotland. That is edging northwards, followed by heavy downpours into Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland, and also scattered showers and sunny spells further south. The best of any drier weather will be towards the southeast, although it's going to be blustery for many of us, and it's going to feel on the cool side. Now, overnight, we're going to see the approach of this area of low pressure named Storm Kieran because of the risk of disruptive and in some places damaging winds around southern coastal areas in particular. Initially, it's the wet weather that could cause problems. Overnight, that sweeps into the south of the UK, and then the winds strengthen. Southwest England, most at risk of the strongest winds during the early hours of Thursday. In places, gusts of 80 or 85 miles an hour, but they will mostly be affecting the coast, and then that swathe of strong winds through the day on Thursday moves along the coastline to affect, by the afternoon, the southeast of England, with, again, coastal areas most at risk of some very strong winds, 70, 80 miles an hour. Inland, more like 50 or 60 miles an hour, and much lighter winds further north, although it will be a blustery day with heavy rain in places. Bye-bye.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best.
Bellissima.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
Oh, no, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The dinosaur.